Welcome back to Everything in Between. I'm with Paula. I've known her for a long time. She's a psychologist. She just founded a non-profit organization called the Semicolon Society. And Paula, I'm just curious, going back, what made you want to become a psychologist in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting question because it was never on my radar to become a psychologist. I started as a teacher and thought that's what I would do. And then my life kind of shifted and changed a little bit. And I ended up in psychology and found that I really connected with it, um, especially working with kids and teenagers, which is usually who I end up working with, and young adults. I just found that it was a good fit for me, that I was able to kind of make some good connections with people and relate, I guess, in some ways that it doesn't always happen naturally.
Now, you mentioned being a teacher or whatever. You were actually my teacher in middle school. I'm wondering, was working with me, is that what clicked? No, I'm just kidding, but...
Well, because part of the thing is that when I was working as a teacher, I was frustrated that I wasn't able to, there were challenges and things that students were facing, and I could only do so much as a teacher because my role had to really ultimately come down to academics. And so I think that's where I started shifting and kind of started burning out because there were pieces that I wasn't connecting that I wanted to be a part of. And so I ended up actually becoming a school psychologist first before I ended up in my own private practice as a private psychologist, just to, because I wanted to make those other more mental health and social emotional kind of connections than focusing more on the academic.
When did you make that switch?
I taught for about 5 years before I started feeling the burnout. And then it was a gradual switch over as I became a school psychologist. And then I realized as a school psychologist, there's a lot of different roles a school psychologist has, and counseling and supports is one of the things that's not as prominent in that job, unfortunately. And I realized that's what I wanted to do, was again provide those things. So then I gradually shifted into a private practice too.
So this Semicolon Society, what is it? What it's about?
So Semicolon Society is a pure passion project. I've been working in the community for a number of years, trying to provide community mental health education specifically on suicide prevention. And then over the years, I've made some connections working with people in the community, like police departments and council members, working with people on creating events so that we can provide suicide prevention information, but then also responding to following a suicide at vigils and gatherings, things that are happening in the community, by providing them with some support so that people have a place to process and have information on how to support each other following a suicide. So it's just kind of been this passion project. It started for me when I was actually a school psychologist and we had someone die by suicide on campus. And it was a very, of course, rattling experience. And then I realized that it really stirred something in me in that suicide piece. And kind of interesting because I hadn't connected some of my previous experiences, my personal experiences, to my work as a psychologist really until that moment, which was then it just kind of connected with me, my own history, especially as an adolescent, of suicidal ideation, that the fact that this had happened on my campus just really connected a piece with me that I hadn't really done much with other than just kind of move forward from. So it really stirred something in me. And so that's when I started working really hard within the school district to develop suicide prevention protocols and risk assessments. And then I thought, you know what, we can only do so much in the school. We've got to reach parents and we've got to reach the community. And that's when I just started kind of working on making those connections. So Semicolon Society is finally a culmination of all these efforts put into a nonprofit that's focused on giving free community mental health education on all kinds of topics, and then also suicide prevention education and suicide response.
What do you think some of the signs are, something that people should watch out for when it comes to, depression or potentially even suicidal thoughts?
So yeah, it's First of all, when we feel like something is wrong with someone that we care about, we have to listen to that. A lot of times we write that off. We write off our own intuition and our own gut feelings, whether it's a parent or a friend or whoever it is. We start noticing, you get that feeling like something's wrong with this, something's off. And we push that aside too much. So, first of all, we need to make sure that we actually pay attention to that and do something with that. And some of the big signs, if someone talks about suicide, then that's a big sign, which is always interesting to me that I even have to say that. But how many times, especially when we're looking at teenagers, kids, young adults, how many times is that written off as just being dramatic or just wanting attention? But if someone's talking about suicide and thoughts of suicide, then we need to be aware of that. We also want to look for things like big changes in behavior or interest or involvement or activities, marked changes in like, wow, they don't do that anymore. That's something that they used to love doing and they don't do that anymore. Or they really withdrawn, those things that have really been a big change from how they were at another point. And one of the things too that we can listen for is a sense of feeling like a burden to people. That's often a sign or a link to suicidal thinking and possibly suicide attempt. That feeling like you'd be better off without me. I only cause more problems for you. I only cause you trouble. You should have had a better friend or spouse or child or whatever it is. That kind of language about feeling like a burden, especially when it's matched with kind of a sense of hopelessness about the future, like things aren't going to get any better, no one can help me. Because if you put that together, if I feel like a burden to the people I love and I feel like nothing's going to get better, then you can see where that pathway to suicide can emerge.
So obviously, there's only so many things you can do when you are talking to your child or your friend. I'm wondering, at what point, what do you think, would urge them to seek, help like therapy or medication?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it kind of varies on the situation, of course, but I think, first of all, it's important for us to open up some conversation with that person who we care about and to put out, I noticed that things are different or that you seem more down or, I want to be here for you. I want to know what's going on. It's okay to talk about suicide. It's okay to talk about depression. It's okay to use these words and to even ask, are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling suicidal? None of that stuff is going to put ideas or anything like that into the other person's head. Like that's a disproven myth. So it's okay to have these conversations. It's okay to be direct to someone and say, I'm worried about you. Tell me what's going on. And when we have those conversations, the big piece there is to make sure that we're being validating, meaning that we don't have to like what they're telling us, but we can acknowledge it. We don't have to try to change it or fix it. Because it's not like, when we're depressed or anxious, it's not like we wouldn't jump on, right? If I had the magic fix, I would stop it. But that there is no magic fix. So we can't be trying to fix it for them. Well, did you try doing this? Did you try doing that? That's going to shut down that person, just like it'd shut down us if someone was doing that to us. And people want validation. So that means, I hear you. I'm here for you. I hear how upset you are. And just validating that you are listening. And listen, take the time to listen, not to fix it or anything like that. And then offering support and just saying, how can I help? How can I support you? How can I be here for you? What do you need from me? And, so those are key pieces in having those conversations. As far as recognizing when someone needs more support, that's if we're having a conversation about depression and about suicidal thoughts, then it's probably a good idea to try to encourage someone to be reaching out, whether it's to a crisis line or to try to find a therapist or something along those lines. But that's a hard balance, right? To do that. I think it's important for us to recognize too that like crisis lines and those kinds of resources are not just for the person who's experiencing the crisis. If I'm there with my close friend and I'm worried about them, I'm in crisis too. So it's okay for us as the other person to also contact those crisis lines and say, hey, I don't know what to do. And to have them there to kind of maybe help guide through or maybe to connect to some local resources.
I actually have the opinion that even if there's nothing wrong with you, everyone should sort of see a therapist. Just
If everyone in this world saw a therapist, I think we'd be in a better world.
yeah, because most of your problems, at least they're typically with the people you're closest with, and you can't
Hmm.
necessarily talk to them fully about it, or maybe you don't feel comfortable. But there's a lot of not taboo, but just thoughts that like therapy's not for me or it's not helpful, and those people, want you to, um, just think logically, don't think emotionally, and to me, I've been in therapy most of my life, and that seems to be what therapy is to try to put logic to your feelings, so it's kind of like, those people don't really know what they're talking about, and therapy is an amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times we don't recognize the thought patterns that we have that sustain and fuel our anxiety, our depression. That we're so immersed in them that we don't even realize that there's other ways to think about things and other ways to interpret situations. And I think that's one of the big things that therapy can do too, is kind of offer some guidance in doing that. And I mean, and the best therapists aren't the ones that are going to say, go do this or go do that or change your mind or fix this. They're going to be the ones that listen to you and try to, and just give you some guidance into figuring things out yourself and what you need.
Yeah, I'm curious. I would imagine kids in school that the majority of what's going on with them would be being, maybe they're being bullied, there's isolation, maybe they had a bad breakup. What's some of the things that you'd think as like a parent or a friend could do to fill that hole of like no one loves me and I'm all by myself?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, especially with kids, that's really where we get into it as parents, trying to be the fixers and trying to fix it for them or minimizing it. This isn't a big deal. I think one of the things parents say the most, that is probably one of the most distancing things they could say, is that, in 5 years this isn't going to matter. In 10 years this isn't going to matter, because it matters to the kid right now. And we have to remember too, like, to kids, to a 15-year-old saying in 5 years this isn't going to matter, that conceptualization is like, well, 5 years ago I was 10, and that was like, that's a whole different world. Like, that doesn't mean the same to them that it might mean to us. So I really, with those, it's listening, giving opportunities to listen to our kids, it's giving opportunities to, just talk about what's going on in the day. And when things are brought up, saying, tell me more about it. What's going on? I'm here for you. And then just shutting up and listening to what they have to say. And then validating that. I hear you. That sounds awful. It sounds like you're really hurting right now. And then again, the whole validation support thing, if we could just remember that, that applies to everyone of any age. Let me hear you. Let me validate what you're saying. I hear you. And then let them know that I support you. What do you need from me? How can I help?
So where have you all reached out to, or done talks with the Semicolon Society, or just the information about suicide in general?
Yes, so a lot of my focus has been in Chandler because that's where my work is, that's where I live, that's where my kids go to school. So I've really tried to, fill in some of those gaps in Chandler. So I've been connected with like the Chandler Police Department, some of the city council members. I've also had some connections with some school districts, and also some organizations like psychology-based organizations, and the Suicide Prevention Coalition is a great organization that kind of have conferences and things like that for people that want to know more information, or maybe already a part of suicide prevention but they need more information. And I think those kind of connections are really big. As a community, I've in the past held some symposiums for parents where they can come and get free education. During the pandemic, I ran a Zoom series on different topics of mental health aimed towards parents, that just kind of kept cycling that, and um, trying to get people connected with that and with information and resources. So it's kind of been kind of all over the place. And part of the idea of the organization now is that I can hopefully collaborate with some other organizations, and we can make things a little bit more consistent and streamlined.
So I just discovered this not too long ago, maybe a couple years ago, but So anytime I've ever been depressed, it's been something that's happened to me, like, maybe a bad breakup or just something physical, actual that's happened to me. But my wife, she describes her depression to me as, nothing's actually happening, but I'm still depressed. What is there a title difference in the two? Potentially, I've been calling it situational depression and depression. But I'm curious on, your thoughts on the differences between the two, because, in my mind, this is what I picture in my head, is there's a guy whose car breaks down, right? And he's upset, and he looks at the person who there's nothing happening to that person, and, he belittles them, and, nothing's wrong with you. But the thing is that guy can get his car fixed, and the next day he's okay. But this person's still depressed, and nothing is happening to them. So, yeah, the differences between the two, and is there a title difference between the two?
I like your title difference. It hasn't really been, I don't think it's really been distinguished, like as far as like the DSM goes and things like that, the difference, because it's more about characteristics
What
of
is
depression.
DSM?
The Diagnostic Statistical Manual. So it's kind of where we go by our formal diagnoses. As a psychologist, like that's what I refer to. And so it's not really separated, because in that it talks about the characteristics. So feeling hopeless, feeling guilty, feeling sad. Yeah.
I think it should be. Those are two very different things.
So I think the thing that really matters there too is the treatment too. Because if we're looking at something more situational based, and I think it's important to know the two, that sometimes the situational based, or even the more, I guess oftentimes that's more of a chemical based kind of depression, where something's just going on internally that shifts me into a depressive mode or depressive cycle without necessarily a trigger. But I think also there's a merging, because sometimes there's things that are kind of like small triggers that we may not even be fully aware of. So like, say your beloved dog dies, right? That's a situational piece that you can respond to, and you might feel depressed. But then it might be, months later that your neighbor gets a new puppy, and then you feel depressed because it was a triggering thing of something underlying. And you can go back into all kinds of things, into childhood, things like that, that are just like that can be a minimizing piece too, where we're like, you're depressed because of that. And it's like, no, it's not because of that. It's because it ties into all this history that comes back up. So I think, that can be minimized too. But yeah, I think the treatment piece is really different, because if it is purely a situational thing, then your treatment is probably going to be more along the lines of like a cognitive behavioral therapy type of thing. Let's talk about how you're interpreting it. Let's talk about goal setting. Let's talk about problem. What do you want to happen? What do you want to be different? And to, work on some of those things. Sometimes a more chemical-based depression needs, some sort of medication support in addition to therapy, which I think is always a helpful component regardless of which type.
Do you think there's any way out of chemical depression? I like that. Situational chemical. Without medication. Is there a way to think or change behaviors and shift the chemicals in your brain that are causing you to be depressed?
There's a lot of things because we're talking about like the neurotransmitters in our brain, and those are affected by a number of things, and it's not just them acting on their own. There's certain things that we do that can affect, like serotonin and dopamine. Those are kind of the big ones, that kind of affect mood. For example, physical exercise automatically releases those to a greater extent. You get an endorphin rush. You feel better after periods of physical exercise, usually. That's something that actually enhances the chemical flow of the brain, so to say. Other things are like, there's even little strategies, like and I don't want to minimize and say like just smile and you'll feel fine, but there's actually a dopamine release when you physically smile. So sometimes people will say like, just practice smiling even if you don't mean it. That's not a fix by any means, but that's another example of certain things that we can do. So I mean, really it comes down, there's a lot of physical things that we can do. Calming strategies, mindfulness, those things that kind of just help calm our whole body. They're also calming our brain, and they're helping with that neurotransmitter balance also. So there's a lot to say, especially with the physical piece, meditation, mindfulness, exercise, changing your environment, getting out of the dark room and going into the sunlight, like just those kinds of shifts. Going into water, for some people, that's a very relaxing kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that you can do. It's very individual for each person. Usually, though, you want to tie in some sort of thinking too, like you being aware of any negative thinking patterns, because especially if someone has experienced more chemical depression, that's kind of cycling over and over throughout their life, they're probably having some pretty negative thinking patterns too, maybe about themselves or about the world, or different. So those things can be targeted too. But there's definitely plenty of people who have that chemical side of depression, anxiety also, that don't take the medication.
So my wife does not have insurance, and she wishes she could go to therapy. And, I tried to talk to her as best as I could, but, I'm not a professional. There's only so much I can do, and I obviously will never stop trying. What do you think someone who has no access to therapy, can't afford it, has no insurance, what can they do and where can they go if they, that's where they actually should be?
Right.
Like if you were talking to that person right now, what would you advise them to do if they literally couldn't go to therapy, but they needed to, Is there a substitute for something like that, or something that at least they should be thinking about or working on?
Right. Well, first of all, I would try to encourage reaching out to places like Impact or hotlines or something like that, just to further explore, because there are and I can't tell you right now who or what they are, but there are some opportunities sometimes within the community, even for a short term kind of individual therapy types of situations. Or sometimes you're going to find support groups that are really, you run a support group, and that fills in one of those gaps where there can be free support groups out there in person or online through social media that provide that kind of, it's not a therapy, but it's a level of support that provides validation that helps you kind of maybe to shift and to start thinking through some of these ideas, to hear some other people's experiences, to feel a little bit of hope about them, to come up with other examples, like, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that. Maybe that's something that I can incorporate and might help me. So there's a lot of, kind of self-help stuff out there too, which I'm never too quick to jump on, because you got to be careful. Some self-help is really, it has to match what you need. And there's so much self-help out there that it can take some time to figure out what that match is. I know there's a lot of self-help books that do not resonate with me, but then every now and then I find one that's like, oh, that's, that just kind of fits. I just needed that reinforcement. So I think some of those things, I think educating oneself about what it is that they're experiencing, going to reputable websites and learning more about what depression is, for example, and what that means, and finding any connections through that way. So there's other things we can do. I don't know that therapy is its own thing, so there's really not a substitute, but I think that there's multiple things that we can use to address these. And so none of it acts by itself. Someone taking medication isn't the fix. Medication is one part of a whole box full of strategies.
I know a lot of people think depression and sadness is just, a feeling, it's a thought. But for me, with my situational depression, I was in a lot of relationships, and I've lost a lot of people, family, friends, and there's this feeling you get in your heart where it's just squeezing, and there's a pit in your stomach, and you get physical sensations from this. I actually sleep on my stomach. I'm not depressed anymore. I don't have heart pain. But for the longest time, I did, and the only way I could fall asleep was to put pressure on my heart. So I fall asleep on my stomach with pressure on my heart, holding my heart every night. And, if I don't do that, I wake up in terror, and that might be a good way to go to the anxiety side of things. You mentioned that I'm trying to run a support group, so I've been agoraphobic for 6 years. It's gone up and down. I've been able to leave. Sometimes I've been bedridden. But a lot of the time it's been very isolating. You can't leave your house. You can, but you don't think you can because you're terrified of panic, and you associate panic with the outside and being out of control. I've lost a lot of people, and that is why I've tried to start this support group. I've met a lot of like witch doctors and people trying to sell me their book. I actually had someone try to sell me their divine device, is what they called it, and they could scan me through the internet and see everything that's wrong with me, and at a touch of a button I could get a stimuli right where I needed in my body, and I'm just going to be cured. And he wanted $4,000 for it. So there's a lot of people on the internet that are offering help that is just like ridiculous. If you give me money, I will cure you. And a lot of the anxiety, agoraphobic, depression, isolation state, it's, you're all alone. And I'm trying to create a situation to where no one has to be. Obviously, mine is more based with anxiety, but I think, a life spent alone in your house, looking outside, watching someone walk down the sidewalk and, like being jealous of that person just for being able to be out there, missing the conversation of like, ringing up something at a gas station, hey, how are you? Like that is a distant and, treasured memory that, people not necessarily take for granted, but they don't realize how important those interactions are, or just interactions in general. As of right now, I think there's like 120 people in the group, but we have a chat on Facebook, so that's running 24/7. People are talking about whatever, but when someone comes in there feeling anxious or panicky, everyone drops what they're doing and tells them that they're okay. And the thing is everyone in there is so sure that that person is going to be okay, but they can't tell themselves that when they're panicking. They they feel like they're dying, they can't breathe, their heart's going. But feeling like you're not alone. For me, when my wife leaves for work and I'm by myself, I get super anxious. I feel like I'm panicking. It's hard to breathe. I have a panic attack. But since I've joined this group, just the idea that I'm not alone and there are people who think just like me, and some of them will call me, some of them will do FaceTime with me, and it's given me a lot of confidence. They tell me positive and encouraging things. We're also trying to start like a group support situation, and obviously I can't call that like group therapy, but it's like an AA situation where we meet once a week. People share a little bit about what's going on, they get feedback. It's all on Facebook. There's actually an emoji that raises your hand, so we go one at a time and I call on people's hands. And the third thing would be this podcast that I have. I've been having people share their stories of, I've had an agoraphobic who's had not left their house for 16 years. And, even he's telling me that, he's becoming inspired by these people and just this community of like togetherness, and that we're all, fighting the same fight. And me at home, partly I'm having a bit of a issue because I know how important this group is to me. I know how important it is to other people, and I've been spending I don't have boundaries. I don't leave my house, and like in my eyes, I don't have a job, and all of my energy and focus is going into the group, to where for me, obviously, I do think it's very helpful for everybody, and it is helpful for me to a degree, but, I don't not think about it. I'm always trying to, find people that are all alone so they don't have to be, and, trying to help people, talk to people. I have not sat down and tried to work on myself in quite a while, and, it's hard to step away from, just because I know how important it is, and it's something I need to work on. When I'm talking to my therapist, I recognize that I can't call her in the middle of the night. But these people call me in the middle of the night, and I tell them they can, and I want to be there for them. So boundaries is something I need to work on. But at the same time, it's like, what if someone comes in there and they're on their last leg and I wasn't there? It's a difficult situation. It's important, and I need to navigate it the right way, but yeah, I don't know if you
I think one of those things too that just makes me think of is that, as we're kind of in the helper model, right? I mean, same thing with therapists, is that we get so focused on other people's things, and then we end up collapsing and not realizing all of our own things, or the world kind of collapses around us. This is a tremendous opportunity to empower others to lead. So one of the things is that, and it's part of this process with this support group and this group working together, is that you guys also have this power to talk about how each other can be empowered, and that it doesn't have to all be the one person who's available 24/7. It can be a mix of things, and it doesn't have to be all you. And that's something too, when we get into that that caretaker role, it does feel like it's all us, but I know how to do it. I know how to I do this well. And sometimes we have to, because we can only go 100% for so long before we start burning out.
It's hard to know the answer and then to do it. If that when I leave a soda somewhere, even if I'm with my family, if I walk out of the other room, I will throw that soda away. Someone poisoned me. I'm gonna die. Whatever. I know they didn't, but my brain tells me that they did. And there are a lot of people that I've met on here that I completely trust, and that would be there, and that would, plenty of people are helping everybody. But I can't walk away from it. It's like, in my mind, everything will catch on fire the moment I stop paying attention to it. And I am trying to work on that.
That's the thing about anxiety too, is that it's about what could happen. Usually it's about what could happen. And so then when we avoid experiencing that thing, we're just feeding the anxiety. We're like, you're right, that's going to happen, so I can't ever do that. But then that hard piece is actually finding that ability to step away. But sometimes it's just for a minute, sometimes it's just for an hour, sometimes it's just a tiny bit of that step away. But it definitely is a difficult process.
I find that the only time I'm anxious or panicking is when I'm thinking about something that would make me anxious or panicky. And I think last year I was able to, I can't say beat, I ended up right back where I was, but I was doing a lot better. I started out bedridden, and I was able to eventually go 2 hours away, up north. We stayed at a cabin. But the only way I was able to, fight back is to not think about it. And there was even a point, I remember being in a car, which is one of my triggers, and thinking, I'll just not think about it. If I have an anxious thought, I'll just think about something else. This is easy. I gained so much confidence where I was back to that mindset. And, I only had one coping technique, really. It was the progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense up your muscles and release them. And the moment I overused that and had another panic attack, right back where I was, afraid of going outside, afraid of, so for me, being alone, and I've actually cured that to a degree with this group. A car, it's hot in Arizona, our AC doesn't work that well. I feel trapped in this heat death box, and I can't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing would be being too far away from what I consider safe, which would be my house. And I know that the only way to, I can't say beat anymore. I don't think I'm ever going to say beat, in my anxiety. But the only way to get better, not fully, obviously, but is to face my fear. And it's weird. It's like I have to consciously choose to do something that I know is going to scare the shit out of me. And that's a hard thing to do. It would be similar to, not exactly, but it would be similar to, there's a hot stove, and I'm going to put my hand on it and keep it there until I'm not actually being burned in this situation. I have
Right.
to have my mind tell me that I'm not actually being burned. The stove is not actually on, even though every part of my brain is telling me it is on, and this hurts, and it's
Mm-hmm.
scary. It's like, if I don't know. And I also think, there are a lot of people in this sort of agoraphobic situation, who have people that potentially don't understand. Get over it. Let's just go. Dragged out of the house, and I do think that, when you're forced into those situations, potentially, in depression, when you're forced, like, just get better, just get over it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You have to be in the right headspace
Right.
and the right mindset. I remember the first 3 years of having anxiety or whatever. I was just convinced I was dead, the whole time. I had never experienced anxiety before, or dizziness or anything. I must be dead. There's no way I could, be causing this myself. And, the whole time my family and friends were telling me all the right answers. I have anxiety, it's all in my head. And that's a triggering thing for people. It's all in my head
Mm-hmm.
because it causes physical sensations. But it
Mm-hmm.
is true. It's your
It also
thoughts.
causes shame and
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Um, but, I had to somehow, and I don't even know how it happened, but I had to be in the right place to receive that information.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're giving your people that you're talking to, whether it's depression or anxiety, even if you're giving them all the right answers, um, you can't force it. And I think, as therapy is, it's not like giving you all the right answers and just telling you what to do. It's guiding you to the right answers so you can discover them for yourself. Because, if you're giving the person all the right answers and they don't believe you, that's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They have to believe it themselves. And, I think the cure to, not cure, but to get better, I can't call it cure anymore, but the cure to, I did it again, but getting better as far as anxiety or depression is really just a belief within yourself. And it's another plane of existence. And I've been saying for a while now that I don't think the cure to anxiety, and now I would also say depression, is in your head. Potentially there's certain thought patterns you can go, and, I'm not trying to go in like a spiritual route here, but I do think the answer is in your heart. Like, you need to manifest bravery and courage and love and positive things. And I do think, like, hate and fear are very super strong emotions that can consume your entire world. But the polar opposites of that, love and courage,
Mm-hmm.
they're so much stronger, and they really are. When
Mm-hmm.
you can get to those places and feel those things, you look back down at your depression and your fear, and you're like, no, this is so much more than that. It's hard to get to that place, but I know that place exists.
And and reaching those places, all this stuff can be reached in very small steps. We need to make sure we're not looking at, here I am and I want to be all this way. I want to be fixed. I want to find the cure. Like you said, that's just not a real. We learn how to live with how we are and how to manage in order to achieve the things that we want to achieve personally. So, but I think, like the idea of, finding that love, finding that courage, finding that positive energy. There is a lot to that, and that can come in really small steps. That can come in, just when someone says something kind to you, we often be like, no, 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 right? We try to write it off, or we just shut up and we say, okay, okay, I'll accept that. Whether or not I feel it, I'll accept it. Or sometimes one of the things I try to do now I want to make it clear, anxiety, depression happens to many people, and it can happen all across the board. I deal with anxiety, and sometimes it feels pretty heavy, and I go through depressive cycles. And sometimes I manage them well, and sometimes I could manage them a lot better. But one of the strategies that I try to do is that I try to, if I'm out for the day or something, or if I'm somewhere, I try to find a way to compliment someone. Just say, hey, I really love your nails, or that dress looks great on you. Whatever it is, because that's bringing forward a positive feeling in myself. There's a reason why, sometimes people refer to that as kind of like selfish action. Well, you're not really complimenting, you're just doing something for yourself. But it goes both ways. That's why one of the best things people can do is like volunteer work or giving to others, or like what you're doing is volunteer work and giving to others. And one of the best things that people can do is doing that, because not only does it support the other person, but it helps us feel good, and feeling good about ourselves. That's a good thing. That's not something that we need to write off. um, I was going to say too, this whole idea, it's all like steps. It's all little steps. And, if there's a big, I wish that I could function like this. I wish I could be like this. I wish I could do that. Okay, let's break it down into one step at a time. And like you said, facing something that scares you, you need to be prepared for that. This is intentional. This is for the purpose of showing yourself that this is not a hot stove. And but to do that, you have to prepare yourself. One of the best things that people can do is to practice different coping strategies at the times that they don't need them the most. So to practice different types of deep breathing, to practice muscle relaxation, practice mindfulness, practice, because some of the stuff does not work for some people, right? Not everything works for all of us. And practice and be like, oh, I like the way that feels. I like the way that felt in my body. And keep practicing that on a regular basis, whether you feel like you need it or not. And to build that, because then you're building a strategy. So when you do go face that thing, that you already have a coping strategy that you have prepared that you can use in that situation. And I would say don't even go, don't make it a huge, big thing. If, for example, the trigger of a car ride, maybe the first step is that you just go sit in the car and it doesn't go anywhere. And you just do that for a minute and use the coping strategy, and then you're done. And you're done for the day, and that's a success, and that's an accomplishment, and that's a step. And you break it, and you just build up into pieces from there. And that's how we, make what we feel like progress. But again, it's about managing and living with it. I don't think our goal is to eliminate it, because it's just, it's something that many people experience to different degrees and different intensities, and we have to figure out our own personal ways of managing that.
As far as agoraphobia, you don't feel safe unless you're at home, but like you said, practicing your coping techniques, you could do that in a safe place first. I would recommend, even if you're feeling a little bit anxious at all, like testing yourself. Like, obviously you should practice when nothing's happening. But, for me, when I first did that progressive muscle relaxation, I was feeling a little bit anxious, and then I became calm, and I was like, holy,
Right.
I can actually calm myself down, and that gave me all the confidence in the world. But I do think there are things you can do within your safe place, with your safe person, such as I drink all the soda in the world. I'm constantly smoking cigarettes. I don't really exercise. I'm always sitting down. And normal people, they walk on their feet for 8 hours a day, and my body is just not used to doing that at all. But walking around's not going to scare me in this house of mine that I feel safe in. It might be boring, but it's not going to scare me. So I sort of think of it as like training for the big fight.
Yeah.
I think that, as you said, with sitting in the car, baby steps, like, I tell the agoraphobics that I talk to all the time, if it's 10 feet that you're afraid of, walk 9, stare at the 10th foot, and just let it become boring. And it may seem boring and it may seem pointless, but as I said, I've talked to people that have been housebound for 16 years, and at least you're making a foot of progress. And, when you feel that feeling of, oh, wait, this stove isn't burning me, this 10th foot, nothing is happening, I'm actually okay, and I actually have some tools that I could work on even if I started feeling I wasn't okay. You get that confidence. And you also mentioned helping people, and a big part of at least depression and like anxiety, which I think anxiety, if you are always isolated, will lead to a depression, is feeling all alone. And going out of your way to do something nice for people. And it's also, there's a lot of shame and guilt and negative thoughts about yourself. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. But doing kind things for others, you get this sense of accomplishment, but you also get this sense of, I'm not a bad person. I can do good things. There are things that I have within me that I can give to the world, and that makes me, more than I thought I was. And I'm not a burden. I'm not a problem. If I put my heart and soul into, whatever it is I'm trying to do, whether it's, you can't leave, but maybe you clean the house for your partner, or, um, even
Mm-hmm.
if you're depressed and, maybe you're a kid at school, you find that other kid that's, all alone and bullied, and you talk to him and you say, hey, man, I know exactly how you feel. And, you're gonna, that kid who feels all alone and has no one, you might make him cry. And, that feeling that you get when you are there for someone and you also know exactly how they're feeling and you can lift that darkness from them, that will just, like, goosebumps, happy tears. And it might sound stupid, baby steps, this is boring, but all those, sayings of, those simple sayings of taking baby steps. So that's the only example I can give right now. But they say that kind of stuff all the time because it works.
Right. It's sad because, yeah, and I usually I frame it, it's very pretty much the same thing, but as next steps. What's my next step? What's the next thing I'm going to do? And I find that helpful, especially when you get into that crisis mode, or that period that you're just collapsed and crying and you don't know what else to do, or you're completely overwhelmed, or that weight is on your chest and it's so heavy you don't feel like you can, do anything at this point. That what is my next step? What's the next thing I'm going to do? And you know what? I might be laying in bed and crying and feeling like I don't know what to do with my life, but I can take a sip of water. And that's just my next step. And then I can move. Okay, so what's my next step from here? What's the next thing that I'm going to do? And yeah, it's those little pieces. Because I think when we put on ourselves that expectation that here I am and I should be here, we want to make sure, that shoulding on ourselves, right? We want to make sure we're not doing that and not making that I need to get there. You mentioned feeling when you were just slightly anxious using the relaxation and you could feel that difference. And I think that's the thing we have to be zoned in on too, is that, if my anxiety is an 8 out of 10 and I can bring it down to a 7, that's progress. That's effective and that's helpful.
I think, for me and for everyone that I've ever talked to, when they go through something like heartbreak or a loss of someone, um, anxiety and depression is not a straight line. Just because you
Mm-hmm.
have ended all the way, even just because you're at the bottom, it doesn't mean you're gonna stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And if for me and my experiences of, like, losing people, but also coming out of it, and being at the very bottom where my heart is just being ripped out of my chest and it's the end of the world multiple times, it's hard to hear that in the moment when you're at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But it absolutely is true that it will get better. And even at that state, potentially it's okay to recognize that it's not going to always be this good, and to be prepared for the dip,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's going to be a constant flow. And yeah, I mean, just wherever you are in your life, whether you're at the bottom or the top, you can't lose hope. Like,
Yeah.
you have to know that, as much terrible things that are happening to you, it can always get better, and there's always a path. Something that you never thought was going to happen is going to happen. That's life, and that could be
Mm-hmm.
for the good or for the bad. And I just think it's important to, get that burned into your brain. Just
Mm-hmm.
that, just because I'm going down right now doesn't mean I'm not going to go right back up, and maybe that's tomorrow. Um,
Well, and a lot of times we have the answers that we need. Most of the time, we have our own answers that we need. And it's just hard for us to realize that and to access that. And looking back and being like, you mentioned multiple losses, and every time we lose again, it re-triggers feelings, like with grief. If you lose someone, it re-triggers the grief from over their losses too. It's complicated, it's complex, it's not linear. It's not each time you lose someone is a different set of grief. It's all, but being able to look back and say, okay, this is really hard for me and having a hard time. What have I done in the past? What did I do before that was something helpful to me? And how can I apply that now? Is there an answer there? Is there something there that can help kind of guide me? But yeah, I think I think the way you explained it is really good, that it does shift, and you're never at the bottom constantly and you're never at the top constantly. And that there's a lot of gray area in there too, where we can work on different coping and building other things into our lives. I've had a number of times where I've had clients, therapy clients, and they or their parents have said, they're better, they're doing good now, so we want to discontinue. And my response to that is usually, no, this is the best time for us to continue. Because when you're at that place, then you can really start building up more of that coping and really focus on what is it that's working well for me right now? And how do I hold that? And how do I maintain that? And how do I prepare? Because especially on the chemical end, right? Or I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow, right? There could be something that shifts or changes situationally or chemically that puts me in a different place than I feel today. And I can prepare for that.
I think it is important, even if nothing is happening to you. This goes back to everyone should have a therapist. It's just like you really should have all the damn strategies in the world, because life is going to go up and down whether or not you think it is. It will. Mm-hmm. You will find challenges. This is hard to hear, but you're going to lose people. And it's going to be more traumatic than anything you've ever experienced in your life, and you're not ready for it. And even if you do therapy, you're not ready for it. But at least you're more ready for it than you would be if you hadn't done that. And it's also just nice to talk to people. I know a lot of people aren't, big sharers, or maybe they have social anxiety. But, baby steps. Maybe sit there and don't tell your therapist anything and just say hi, and, that's the first session, and if that's what you got to do, but
sometimes that's the way it goes. Yeah. And some of the stuff that you're saying, like building up strategies and all of that, I mean, what we're doing is we're building our own resiliency, that ability that, yeah, crap is going to happen to us. And there's also going to be exciting things that happen in our lives. It's not one-sided, but it's also, there are going to be things that happen. We're going to lose people. We're going to go through tough times, and we want to get to that point where we can say, this sucks and I'm having a hard time, but I know I'm going to get through it.
You mentioned things are going to go, get really exciting for us as well as get bad. And I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, randomly you could throw something out on the internet and go viral. And now you have, in this world, now you have 1 million people and you're an influencer. And that's a awesome thing, but also the pressure of that, and just you can't develop this hot head because potentially now you're going to be all egotistical and a tyrant. You really have to try to find balance in every aspect of your life. Whether or not you think you're ever going to be in one of those predicaments, you will be in the bad 100%. You may not get super famous and become egotistical, but that could happen too. So it is important to become resilient even against the positive things in you. Like, you can't get too big of a head. I say all the time, I smoke a lot of cigarettes, right? And I always tell myself, or to people that say, you should quit, and obviously I should, that if I were to drink as much water as I do smoke, every 10 minutes drink a glass, I'd probably drowned. And, just because something's good for you, exercise, drinking water, maybe even this group, and how I'm so focused on it that I'm not paying attention to myself. Everything that is even helpful for you can hurt you if you do it too much. Too much sleep, too much, I'm sitting all the time, I'm becoming weaker. The more comfortable thing usually is the worst thing for you, but at the same time, even if you are doing all the right things, you can do them too much. So within your mind and your body, you need to find a balance and just, not overdo any aspect, but sort of be ready for anything. And that's impossible to do, but you have to try.
So always striving for balance, always trying to find that peace. And it's interesting. I know for me, I've had a big shift with the nonprofit coming up and having a lot of things that are coming from it already so fast. And it's another point in my life where I need to sit back and look at my balance and figure out how, I can't immerse myself in that 100%. I could, but I don't want to, because I know there's other aspects of my life and just my own self-care that I need to be aware of, or else I'm going to lose that fuel. I'm going to lose that energy. So yeah.
You have to know your own value. I have to know when I walk away from the room, when I walk away from this group that I've created, there's people in it that I trust. I have to trust in myself and what I've made to walk away, take time for myself, because if we get burnt out, if we just go, you do two talks a day every day, you're not going to be as effective, and
Right.
you may reach more people, but you might not be helping anyone, and I think it's important to take time for yourself. You might want to slave away at your job or whatever and just go, 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 go. I have to go as big and hard as I possibly can, but you're not. You're tired. Now your brain's foggy. Now, you have to be sharp and prepared and ready, and part of that is taking time off and thinking about something simple or nothing at all. And it's hard knowing that there are things that I know are really important to do, and I'm not doing them right now, and that's hard to step away from, just as it's hard to voluntarily face the fear. But you have to have those calm moments of nothing, and really just gather your thoughts and your feelings and potentially distract yourself. And I know that sort of falls into addiction, to where you can distract yourself too much or become addicted to the distraction because you're not focused on all the stressful things in your life. And that's where the balance comes in too. You can't.
Well, I would say that we have to have different types of coping strategies. We need our distraction coping strategies. Those have a place. There's sometimes that I just need to watch Netflix, or I just need to go on my phone. Those have a place. Like you said, too much of anything can create problems and be unhealthy. But those do have a place. But we also need outlets. We need to know what are my outlets? Maybe it's talking to someone, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's creating music, maybe it's writing in a journal. What are my outlet strategies? And then who are my people? And where are my places? Who are the people and places that I can be around, and maybe not even talking about what's going on, just being around people. Who are the people that make me feel better about myself? Who are the people that I feel like I can be genuine around? Where are the places it can be in my own home? Where are the spots that I just feel comfortable in, that I just feel, safe? Where do I feel safe? And we want to have all of those pieces and have that balance. Not using any of it too much, which is a personal thing to kind of figure out, But one of the things too you were talking about is that thought stopping. That's such an important skill. It's such a hard skill. But to just give yourself that time where I'm just going to focus on me. Yeah, I have to do this and this. I'm not listening to that part right now. I'm not listening to those thoughts right now. My thoughts now are focused on me, or focused on this activity or this person who I'm with. And that's something we have to very intentionally do, because otherwise we'll just get bombarded, and those thoughts about what we should be doing are pretty loud, and then we end up neglecting ourselves.
Like I said with the stove, everything in your brain is telling you not to do it, and the stove is not turned off in reality, or not turned on in reality, but in your mind it is, and you have to force yourself to put your hand there until you realize, okay, it's not on. And there is a lot of intention when you have to pay a lot of attention to yourself, and with a lot of intent to force yourself to walk away from those things. And I sort of want to talk about my new strategy as far as facing my anxiety this time. And I know I've talked to you a little bit about this before, but I just had this. I have a big imagination. When I picked up, a stick when I was a kid, that would be a sword now, and I'm fighting bad guys. And I just had this image in my mind that, the brain. I think there's images of that it's similar looking to the universe. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but I do think that your thoughts and your imagination are infinite. And you can manifest anything you want. And consciously that's hard to do. Unconsciously it happens to us all the time, where we go different places, we're not really in control. But you can manifest terror, you can manifest courage, you can manifest hate and love. And when you watch movies, a horror, the killer isn't chasing you, right? But you're terrified. Something outside of your body that you're thinking about, you are manifesting that feeling. And when you see a romantic comedy or whatever, they're not kissing you, but you cry happy tears, and you get that feeling in your stomach. There are thoughts you can think, and that's hard to do with no stimulation, but you can get these experiences from movies or people that you talk to. You get inspired by things outside of yourself, but what I'm trying to do is look inward, and I associate my anxiety and panic with death. So normally if someone's afraid, they're afraid of something physical, like a bear chasing them or whatever, but all of their adrenaline and energy is focused on the threat. So what I'm trying to do is visualize my fear, and it's something I can focus on. So when I start feeling anxious, in my mind, I close my eyes, and there he is. He's death. He's coming right for me.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to get me. And, with the intrusive thoughts and, unconscious feelings that I'm getting, this anxiety that's creeping out of nowhere, whatever it is that's triggering me, if I'm in the car or if I'm too far away or I'm alone, I'm trying to have this mental battle within myself. I think that, as I said, we can manifest terror, right? We should be able to manifest courage. So in my mind, I'm telling myself I'm going to die. Something's wrong with me. This is my brain telling me this, but it is lying to me. And I'm trying to tell myself the truth. No, I'm okay. I've done this before. I've never passed out before. I've never had to go to the hospital before. I know if I think about anything else, I'm going to be okay. So I'm trying to fight back, and I'm trying to imagine myself like in a dream, how, intrusive thoughts, there's not really control. It just sort of happens to you. And that's similar to a dream where you sort of experience it. You're there, but you're not really there. But if you can become aware within your dream, you are God in your mind, because, you could do anything in your dream. I'm trying to do this while I'm awake. Just close my eyes and imagine that I'm fighting death, but it's happening within the realm of my mind, because it is, and I'm trying to, have this godlike battle within my head against what I think is the top fear, death, and I'm still working on it, but
yeah.
I'm trying.
But that's really powerful. That's a really powerful strategy, but just that recognition, like, this is coming from my own head. This is coming from me. And so how do I count? That means that I can address it. I can fight back. I can counter it. And I know it's somewhat similar. I know some people have done things like, where they create a drawing or an image or something, and this is the anxiety. These are the anxious thoughts. This is what they look like to me, and kind of pulling it out and saying, you know what? So I can tell you now that I can see you, now that I envision you, I can tell you no, that I don't accept that anymore. And I'm not going to allow that to control me anymore. I think on the other side too, we're also building up the other pieces too, where I'm rejecting that, I'm saying no to that, but then what am I accepting instead? What am I bringing on instead? And I think we have to be careful too, because sometimes we get into that, replace an extreme negative with an attempt to be extremely positive, right? Like, no, everything's gonna be fine. Well, you know what? And then something isn't. Say the tire blows out, right? It's somewhere in the middle. It's not life or death. But say the tire blows out, and now I can say, nope, see, I told you something was going to happen. So we have to find that balance, that adaptive thinking, that healthy, helpful thinking, where I'm going to battle that. I reject that extreme. I reject that giving me control. And I'm choosing instead to remind myself that I'm a capable person, that I can get through things, I have strategies, that if there's a problem, I can figure out what to do about it. And I can be okay.
I was just thinking of that wave, and that, life is sort of like a line, but you dip up and down through it. And when there's a dip downward, when something bothers you, like, oh, what is that? That's not good. It's not in my control, and I don't like that. And I have to address that. And that's not good. But when something pleasant happens, it's like, oh, this is nice. I don't really need to pay too much attention to this, but that feels good. And, I think the unconscious thoughts of negative are really powerful. They're out of your control, and they're scary. But I think that conscious thoughts they're more powerful. They're what you're actually focusing on, and you
Hmm.
can, fight back. I do think that.
I would say find your control, because in all these situations that feel uncontrollable and I can't, and this keeps happening to me. Yeah, there's some things that people are going to do or say, or things are going to happen in our life or in our world that we don't control. But we need to find our control within that situation. What piece do I have control over? And focus in on that. And then that helplessness piece doesn't come up as strong.
I think, as far as anxiety goes, and potentially depression to some degree, there are learned behaviors. I need to associate this with fear. I need to associate this with, it's never going to get better. And when you're in a conscious state of, or continuous state of, depression and anxiety, sometimes everything that you're thinking is negative and pulling you down. It's important to reach out to other people, because most people want to help. Most people that you talk to are going to, they might go about it the wrong way. They might try to fix you and force you out of whatever it is. But a lot of people have good intentions, and everyone wants to be a hero. And like what I was saying with the imagination realm of fighting death or whatever. I do think if you can manifest terror unconsciously, then you should be able to manifest courage consciously, and it's really hard to do. And I think the greatest fight of our lives is within ourselves, and you don't have to have that fight alone. It is important to have other people in your life to talk to. Everyone should have a therapist.
Well, and I think, as part of that manifesting the courage and bringing in, yeah, most people want to support, but maybe they don't know how. And I think one of the most courageous things we can do is to communicate to the people who we love and trust what they can do for us. Because they may not even know to ask, and to say, hey, when I'm at this place, when I am like this, when I'm at this panic or whatever it is, this is what I need from you. This is what would be helpful for me to hear from you. And to empower the people we love to be supportive to us.
Yeah, I know it's really hard for people to open up sometimes, that they're afraid they're going to get shot down or be made to feel less. But if you encounter someone that, purposefully tries to upset you or belittle you or makes you feel less, you can't take that to heart. You can't let that stop you from continuing. You know what you need. You went to that person because, you're looking for something. You're looking for support, advice, help. I need out of this horrible situation that I found myself in. And, potentially the person you're closest to is just not that person. And I would hate for someone to be discouraged of, reaching out when they have bad experiences reaching out. There are plenty of people that will be kind to you, and sometimes that's all you really need. I know, when my wife comes to me, a lot of the time, I hear this a lot. Is this a fixing thing, or is this a listening thing? And sometimes people have to just be heard. And me, I'm a fixer. I will always try, just do this, this, and this, and this, and it's all gonna be okay. But sometimes that drives her crazy, and she just wants to be heard. So even if you are a person who might not have all the answers or any answers at all, just saying, like you said, I think, I hear you, I'm with you, that's enough for some people, because some people don't have anything. So you are helpful, even if you don't know anything. You're still helpful. You just have to be kind and nice. And even if you're that depressed person or that anxious person, and you can't figure out anything that's wrong with you, and how can I figure out what's wrong with my friend? You don't have to. You just say, I'm here for you. I want you to be okay. I want you to be happy. And if there's anything I can do, I will do it. And that itself is going to boost your I'm less, and I'm a burden, and I'm a problem. The most simple acts of kindness
Mm-hmm.
can take you out of this just dark state of complete darkness. Just one small light, go
Mm-hmm.
towards that, go for the highest good you possibly can. But you can't think of it that way. As you said, if there's something you want to do, you have a plan for your life, or maybe you have no plan at all, but there's something you want, but it's big. You can't just go straight for that. You're going to lose your mind. You're going to lose yourself one step at a time. And I know it's cheesy and all that, but it really does work, because, you take that 10th foot. If you're agoraphobic, you can only go 9 feet or you're terrified, and you get that confidence, and now I'm going to jump 10 feet, and wait, 10 feet worked, I'm going to go 20 feet. I'm going to go, it's just, it's a buildup of courage and self-worth and self-esteem, and little by little, there are many different paths you can do: cleaning your house, being kind to people, walking a little bit further. But there's
And we need to be kind to ourselves in
Yeah.
doing that, and recognizing with ourselves, I went that 10th foot, that 10th step, and that's great. I did that today. That's what I accomplished. And that's, I think we have to be better at validating ourselves and saying, like, it's okay, of course I feel this way, or I just feel this way, and that's the way I feel, and that's just what it is. And that's my reality, and that's where I'm at. So what's my next step? What's the next thing that I need to do for myself? How do I support myself? Those same things, validation and support. Let's do that to ourselves too.
And also, criticism is okay. Self-criticism, criticism from other people. It's okay to address the problem. It's okay to say the problem out loud, to hyper-focus on the problem and to shame the person or to shame yourself. That's not the way to do it. But to say it out loud, it's okay. It's okay that we're in this situation. It's okay that we're experiencing this. You're not a bad person or less.
Right.
How can we slowly get out of it? What's one tiny thing we can do? And, a lot of people are just quick to get over it. You're lazy, you're whatever. And if you're trying to help someone, the worst thing you can do within a conversation or argument is tell the other person they're stupid and, they don't know what they're talking about. You really have to listen, try to, understand where they're coming from, how did they get to the conclusions that they're at, and slowly guide them out of that with kindness and love, because love beats everything. Like, it really does. Like, positive, as dark as it can get, positive is just, it's just good. That might I know that baby steps and it's just good or positive or whatever, like, all that sounds cheesy, but it's true. Like, love is the biggest, strongest emotion there is, and as much positive as you can muster, you need to muster it. And even if that's congratulating yourself for one step forward, it might seem small to a lot of people, but those steps add up.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you said you have a meeting at 1. I didn't know if you had anything you had written down that you maybe didn't mention, but I have run out of questions.
I think we've touched on a lot. I mean, really, it's, validation, support of each other and ourselves, and being open. I think the thing that we just touched on, that's, we are feeling what we're feeling, and we need to be careful not to be shaming ourselves. That this is where we're at, is where we're at, and there's things that we can do, and there's goals that we can have, but we need to make sure that we're not doing all that negative self-talk, because as soon as we're calling ourselves stupid and bad and all of that, then we're going to take it from anyone else who does that. We need to kind of set the standard for ourselves, I think, and recognize that we have, where we are is where we are, and we're okay, and we all have value, and we all have things that we can accomplish.
I think what you're doing is really important. That's the end route of these depressive, anxiety-ridden, negative feeling states, is doing something as horrible as that. And, to combat that, to even, be there for people that are going through it, that are experiencing the loss. I don't think there's anything more than that. And, I love that, this is a a non-profit situation. This information is free, as it should be. No one should have to, afford to receive this kind of help. This is just pure human kindness, and I'm in a different situation with anxiety, but I do think that as much help is out there that's you have to pay for or have insurance, it's so important to have these resources out there that are just free and for everyone. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm probably going to, with this episode, is link your group, because I think it's important for everyone to talk about and hear, and to have strategies against. And I know my people are anxiety, and I've already seen you post a few coping techniques and strategies for anxiety, and it's all encompassing, all the negative thoughts you're feeling. If you're not taking care of it, if you're not looking out for those those signs and potentially not knowing the right strategies, it's where it could lead, and we don't want that to happen. So
and things like this, like what you're doing, and having just conversations about it, and just having open, direct conversations about mental health and mental wellness, that's one of the best things we can all be doing, is just talk about it. Because it's amazing, it's amazing how much you can connect with people when you say, when you bring up those conversations. And there's so many ways people can relate, and we all assume that we don't. But there's a power of connection out there. So,
well, I appreciate you. You were always my favorite teacher. This is my middle school teacher. So I was addicted to soda, right? And I didn't want to do any work. I didn't want to do my homework or whatever. And she would bring me a Pepsi every day. She'd sneak it in. I don't know if she's allowed to do that, but she would sneak me in a Pepsi and do your homework. And I have only good memories.
I'll give you a Pepsi. Do your work. Come to school and do your work.
Yeah, I only have good memories, and obviously, she's really close to me. I had her at my wedding earlier this year. I think it's awesome that we've stayed in contact this long. That's more than half my life.
Yeah.
And it's just, I really appreciate you and everything that you do, and I hope that we can have more conversations like this and just continue what we're doing, and push forward, and positive, and love, and fight back.
Absolutely. The more of us that do it, the more united we are, the stronger we are.
Sounds good. Well, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.